Please be seated. The court is now back in session. The prosecution, you may proceed.
Mr. President, is that working? Mr. President, I rise at this point not to deliberately interrupt my learned friend, but there is a matter of law that has arisen this morning, and I'd like to explain it, please, and invite some further matters to be taken care of. Mr. President, both defence teams have referred now to witness statements in their cross-examination in respect of witnesses who have not testified. I refer to the statements of Heng Samrin yesterday and this morning to the statements of Ko Vani 19.71 and Tion Prasit, which was an OCIJ statement. Now, Mr. President, we have no problem with this, but it impacts upon another important aspect of evidence yet to be decided upon by the trial chamber, namely the OCP application to admit witness statements in lieu of oral testimony. The defence has so far insisted that these statements, insofar as they relate to acts and conduct of the accused, cannot be admitted into evidence unless the makers of these statements testify. Yet they have, over the past 2 days now, referred to these statements in cross-examination, even in circumstances where the statements refer to the acts and conduct of the accused. The defence teams, in their responses to the OCP application to admit witness statements in lieu of oral testimony, have submitted that the test of exclusion is much wider than acts and conduct and includes pivotal issues, evidence going to important issues, and also even evidence of authority structures. And, Mr. President, impliedly, by the defence teams referring to these statements, it seems that the defence are withdrawing their objections to the admission of such statements absent cross-examination. So my application at this stage is twofold. Firstly, for the defence to confirm its position, and if it is not sufficiently clarified, secondly, for the trial chamber to note my application today as a factor to be considered when the trial chamber ultimately decides whether to admit such statements in lieu of cross-examination. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. The counsel for Kirsampon, you may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a point of clarification, a legal point of clarification, which is essential. The prosecutor is saying that we retracting ourselves from our request to exclude all elements relative to the act and the conduct of the accused. Well, it was never our intent to backtrack there, and I would like to note the specificity of cross-examination. We have here a witness who came as a witness, a fact witness, because he did not wish to testify as an expert. However, in his work as a researcher or as a member of the OCIJ or of the OCP, he made a certain number of statements that were used by the co-prosecutor in his examination because he asked him that these statements were used as sources for Mr. Hetter's writings. Under these conditions, and because we are referring here to the content of the testimony of these witnesses gathered and referred to in the footnotes, well, our way of obtaining information on the other elements that Mr. Heder may have is to confront him with other documents, because we cannot put questions to him as an expert by principle. For example, if I had not based myself on Chun Prasit's statement, which the witness had access to, I would not have had a sufficiently solid base to speak more generally about the other elements that he might have come across. Once again, an examination technique of Mr. Heder in particular, caused by the specificity of his background as a factual witness from 73 to 75, and we also have to make him speak about the content of the case without putting questions to him as an expert. So this was the only way that I could proceed, to have him speak about more general things in the context of his research. So what we're asking the Chamber is not to consider the documents that we referred to as being Mr. Hetter's testimony. What we are interested in is the answer that Mr. Heder provided following the confrontation with the documents that we presented to him. So, simply speaking, when I ask Mr. Heder, is the fact that Mr. Chun Prasit is referred to as a commander of the armed forces, did you hear this? And he answers yes. What interests me is not so much what Chun Prasit said, it is what Mr. Heder said, explaining to us that in the context of his research and in the context of the people he interviewed, this is a fact that transpires from his research. So what I want to focus on is not so much the content of the testimonies here, but it is his answer caused by the document that I'm asking him to comment on. So I want to be clear here. The usage of the documents that we have had now, it is to be able to have Mr. Heder's testimony on these points and not the testimony of other people. And also for him to talk about his experience as a researcher in the context that we're describing. Second point, the Chamber already ruled on this issue, so the idea is not to backtrack what the co-prosecutor is trying to say, well, okay, maybe I can find a back way of getting back into the same issue. No. What we are asking from you, once again, is to understand that for the moment, with Mr. Heder, the only way we can proceed is to confront him with statements and with elements that are on the case file with, once again, the mere objective of getting an answer from him and getting his testimony from him and not the testimony of other people. So this is the second point I would like to raise. And the third point But I think we can discuss this later because it's already 10 to 2. So I am already eating up my examination time. This morning, already half an hour was taken from me. So I would like now to tell the chamber, as of now, that it will be very difficult for me to finish today. I had said at the very beginning of Mr. Hedder's testimony that I would be asking for extra time, and this request is even more pressing. So I don't know if the Nuencia team wishes to say something about this. Another point I would like to specify, and I'll be finished with this. Since Kovani's name was mentioned, but I thought she had a pseudonym, and I thought that the chamber stood by pseudonyms, but I'd like to let you know that she is on the list of witnesses that we would like to examine. But first of all, I'd like to remind you that the idea is not to tender into evidence elements that we're presenting to the witness. It is to use these elements as means to elicit from him his testimony. And that's what I'm asking you to take into account, not the documents themselves, but his response to these documents. Thank you.
President, thank you, Council. And the Council for Nuencia, would you like to say something? Sonarun, good afternoon, Mr. President, Your Honors. On behalf of my clients, Nuencia, I would like the permission from the chamber and from the president for my client to make a brief observation that is 3 minutes long. And he's ready to make that observation now. President, what about the submission by the prosecutor regarding the referencing through the interviews of the witnesses who have not been summoned by the chamber? Do you have any observation or response to that?
Just a very quick reply, Mr. President. We have just finalized a last draft of submissions on this very subject. The question raised by the prosecutor the answer to this question we will incorporate in this final draft. Hopefully we'll be able to file our submissions tomorrow or Friday on this very subject.
President, the chamber permit Mr. Nuencia to make his observation regarding the scheduling of the hearing in questioning him that we schedule for the forthcoming week. Nuencia, you may proceed. Nuencia, good afternoon, Your Honors. I would like to make a brief notification to Your Honors. As I have always reiterated that this court has failed to respect a fair trial, a principle of fair trial, fair and just trial, and through my observation, I observed that the treatment towards the accused and my defense team is getting worse. I therefore have no confidence in this court, and this is a similar position reflected by Kiel Sampon. The treatment by the court toward me is unbalanced, as it seems to favor the prosecution. For example, recently my defense counsel was prohibited from asking substantive questions in order to defend my case. That is an example of injustice, that my counsel is prohibited from performing his defense duty to his full capacity. This is a case of life and death for me. It is not just for granted or an expeditious process to punish me. With such lack of confidence and imbalanced treatment by the Chamber, I would like therefore to notify that in order to respond to the questions put by the prosecution and the party, I declined to do so due to this nature of injustice by this very court. I'm grateful. President, the prosecution, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be extremely brief. I rise in response to this statement by Nguyen Chia and to restate our request now in relation to Nguyen Chia himself, as we have done in relation to Khieu Samphan, an accused who takes a stand and gives evidence in a trial, thereby waives his right to silence. In such circumstances, a refusal to continue to answer questions can properly, and in this case now should, lead to adverse inferences being drawn against him in your consideration of the evidence. I want to inform the Chamber now, because this filing is in progress and it may or may not have reached Your Honours, that we have just recently, yesterday afternoon I believe, filed a response to Khieu Samphan's notification of his withdrawal from testimony, formally requesting Your Honours to draw negative inferences against him, and secondly, asking Your Honours to give us an opportunity to state in open court, in Khieu Samphan's presence, those matters of fact as to which we will invite Your Honours to draw negative inferences. If I can now extend that application to Nguyen Chia as well, and perhaps as a scheduling matter, this is an appropriate time for Your Honours to consider it, given that it appears following Mr. Hedder we may well not be hearing any more witnesses in this trial. Thank you, Your Honours.
President, thank you, the prosecutor and the international lead co-lawyer. You may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be very brief. I simply want to say that even if I am flabbergasted by what I heard, I'm not surprised. I was persuaded that Nguyen Chia would do as Khieu Samphan, and my comments are the same, and I regret infinitely what is happening. My comments are the same as for Khieu Samphan, but I'd like to maybe add one comment. I noticed that little by little, the accused and the defense teams are positioning themselves as victims. For example, the defense teams obliging us to apply rules regarding the scope of the trial. For example, regarding the fact of considering a person as a witness and not as an expert. But when we speak to these defense teams, the defense teams say that when the same rules befall them, we prevent them from speaking and we don't respect the principle of adversarial hearings. I find this unfair, I find this disloyal, and I find this inappropriate. And I find it regretful that this position is being followed by the accused as well as by the defense teams. Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I believe my client already spoke regarding this issue. Written submissions were made in this regard, and we already exposed Mr. Kessampan's position. Now, regarding the co-prosecutor's request to make a final statement before the final statement, I completely challenge this. If in their final statements the co-prosecutors wish to make a statement on this issue, they will do as they wish. And the inferences that will be necessary for you for your verdict can wait until the final statements if they want to make, but the moment for the final statements is the moment for the final statements and not now.
President, the prosecution, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Extremely briefly, I do apologise for holding up the proceedings on this. The reason for that application indeed has to do with the application of law as to adverse inferences. Our intent is to make sure that there can be no complaint by this defence, by either of the two defendants on appeal, that Your Honours did not put them on notice of the exact facts as to which inferences may be drawn. And that's the reason for our application. It is not to sensationalise this issue. It is to ensure that both accused are properly informed as to the issues on which adverse inferences are being requested and on which Your Honours may draw negative inferences before the door in this trial for them to give evidence is finally closed. So we make this application out of both fairness to the accused and ensuring that notice is given to them, but also, frankly, out of fairness to victims and all the other participants in this proceedings. It is important for the accused to hear that statement so that when the proceedings close, there can be no suggestion that there was any doubt in their minds as to what we are asking your chamber, your Honours, to consider in your deliberations. Thank you, Mr. President.
The President. I hand over the floor to Judge Silver Cartwright to clarify on the issue raised by the prosecutor, as well as other matters concerning the proceedings. You may proceed, Judge, please.
Thank you, President. The Chamber notes the observation by the prosecutors concerning the reference by other parties to witness statements where those witnesses have not been called to testify before the Chamber, and it notes that it will deal with this matter if necessary in the verdict. Kyo Sampon's defence team has indicated that it may wish to have further time to examine this witness. That is a matter that will be decided before we adjourn for the day, and again depends on relevance, repetition, and other relevant matters. Thank you, President. I think that's the extent of our discussion.
The President. Thank you, Judge. Now I hand over the floor to the defense team for Mr. Kyo Sampon to put the question to Mr. Steve Hader. You may proceed, Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. Eder. Let us resume our examination where we ended off, document 19.1. I would like to quote a passage from this document, 19.71. And the English page that is of interest to me is 0089768. In Khmer, it is 00602-370. And may I request that this page be placed on the screen. And in French, the ERN is 00614-089. In French, it is the third paragraph on that page, and this is what is stated therein. May I point out to you, Mr. Eder, that the quotation is long. I intend to request you to comment on the entire paragraph, and I will break it up into little bits in order to ask those questions. The first paragraph is as follows. In summary, the intellectuals working in Phnom Penh had no idea of the scale of starvation and execution in the countryside. In 1976, when we were eating gruel in Phnom Penh, we thought that there might be shortages in the countryside. But in 1977, 1978, we thought that things were improving just as they were in Phnom Penh, especially because this is what the radio was saying. Also, there were articles with photographs in magazines. End of quote. Regarding this first part of the statement, please tell me whether in the course of your work as a researcher and as an investigator in the Office of Co-Investigating Judges and in the Office of the Co-Prosecutors, you had the opportunity to read documents relating to intellectuals living in Phnom Penh, or to interview persons living in Phnom Penh who said they didn't know what was happening in the rural areas. Did you gain any knowledge of this as part of your work?
Speaking with regard to, and it's clear from the rest of the paragraph, this is what Coveney is talking about. With regard to non-party intellectuals effectively confined to Phnom Penh, there are certainly some other cases of such people having said similar things to me. I think there are also some contrary instances of people in that category saying that they were considerably more aware of the situation in the countryside. And the determining factor, as I recall from what people have said, is what is suggested here, which is in some instances, those people in that category did have the opportunity to visit the countryside or were visited by people from the countryside who gave them a different indication about what the reality was than this person has described. But certainly there are others who have given accounts similar to this person's, to persons in the same category.
Je poursuis dans la lecture.
I will press on with the reading of the passage, and this will enable us to delve further into this paragraph. In the same paragraph, the same ERN, so we thought that things were okay. As for the party people, it's hard to say. They made visits to the countryside and made reports on their return. But I don't know what was in those reports. I don't know whether they saw the true situation or whether they told the truth to the higher echelons or not. The indications are that when the top party people went down to the countryside, the local cooperative cart put a good face on things, presented tables full of food, and drove away the thin and sick people. End of quote. On this second point, I am still asking questions with a view to laying a foundation, but my objective is to know whether you were able to obtain information on this as part of your work and as part of your investigations, as far as facts are concerned, or even as part of research you carried out in order to draft your articles. Did you hear this kind of information? Did you receive documents related to the fact that indeed in some local cooperatives and in some rural areas, the real situation on the ground was hidden from the hierarchy when there were visits?
Yes, there are many accounts given of the creation of a false facade on those occasions when people from the center or people from the top, if you will, visited the grassroots. And I mean, for example, yesterday I happened to be in a car with someone who recounted that exact scenario. He was in a cooperative in the countryside. They were visited by people from the top, and indeed the local cadre arranged this beautiful scene for them to see. Those accounts differ in the extent to which the people who spoke to me inferred that this creation of a facade was successful in making those who came from the top believe that the situation was as presented or not. But yes, certainly the attempt to create such facades, whether believed or not, was fairly common, quite common.
Je continue pour être...
I will continue reading the passage to be complete. Third paragraph. The person who is writing says the following. You can't say, however, that the upper echelons knew nothing because in the party documents there were instructions about how to straighten out implementation. For example, it was pointed out that in some places CAD did not prepare proper facilities for mobile brigades, so that when the mobile brigades arrived, there were no places for them to stay. It was also said that in some places, people weren't given enough rest, and that people should not be worked through the hot part of the day or at night. End of quote. Regarding this third excerpt, my question to you is as follows. As part of your research, in the course of the reading of documents or interviews you conducted, in order to gather facts, as part of your work for the co-investigating judges and or the co-prosecutors, did you obtain any information that led you to believe that there were instructions given so that attitudes at grassroots levels should change? Did you obtain such information as part of your work?
Yes, both before, during, and after my work at the court, both in official documents produced presumptively at the center level, and in accounts given to me by people in interviews, both with regard to the issuing and the reception of such instructions.
Je vous remercie. J'en ai terminé.
Thank you. I am done with this document as far as this point is concerned.
Je voudrais en venir à...
I would like us to now talk about the documents you were able to consult or on which you worked when you were working either for the Office of Co-Investigating Judges or for the Office of Co-Prosecutors. First of all, this question is obvious, but I would like to ask it so that we can lay the foundation for subsequent questions. Outside of the preliminary work you did on democratic Cambodia, was your work with the Khmer one of the criteria for your hiring to work for the ECCC?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the question. Maybe there was some slippage in the translation. It wasn't clear to me.
Il n'y a pas de souci.
No problem. I'll repeat the question perhaps more slowly. The fact that you worked, you studied the situation among the Khmer, was it one of the criteria for your recruitment to work at the ECCC?
I very much presume so, yes. Certainly those who made the hiring decisions were fully aware of that background.
Vous avez procédé.
You conducted some interviews of witnesses as part of this case. And when you interviewed those witnesses, did you interview them directly in Khmer, or you were assisted by interpreters?
No, directly in Khmer, always in the company of a, if you will, a Cambodian co-investigator. So the business was conducted by myself and my co-investigator, Cambodian co-investigator, entirely in Khmer.
Dans le cadre de vos fonctions,
As part of your work within this tribunal, whether we are talking of your work in the Office of Co-Investigating Judges or the Office of Co-Prosecutors, did you have access to all the documents in your investigations or as part of the research that you carried out?
I think so, of course, with the exception, if I recall correctly, of those categorized as strictly confidential, to which access is not widely given, not given in general the way everything else is.
sur le point spécifique,
Regarding the specific matter of confidential documents, which is of interest to me, as regards records that were available, were you able to read all of them at one point or the other?
All is a big word, but I think it's probably safe to say that I read virtually all the evidentiary documents. Frankly, some of the procedural stuff I didn't pay attention to, but the evidentiary stuff, the fond, as it's known in French, I think I read virtually everything.
je voudrais
I would like to start by referring to documents that I know in principle that you are aware of, since you mentioned them in footnotes in your articles, and the article in question is document E3/3169. And the ERN in French is 00722-073. The ERN in Khmer is 00711381. And the ERN in French is 00722-073. You, of course, referred to dates, and I'm referring to footnote 33. And the source of what you refer to, that is the transcripts of committee meetings between 1973 and 1976, you refer to transcripts of meetings of the Standing Committee meeting on the 2nd of November 1975, and the 22nd of February 1976, the 11th of March 1976, and the 17th of May 1976, and the 30th of May 1976. And you state in these transcripts refer to the presence of Khieu Samphan, and these documents were, of course, provided by David Chandler. I would like to show you in Khmer the transcripts that we have on record corresponding to those dates, and I would like you to confirm whether that is indeed the case. And this is what you were referring to in the footnotes. And then I will put questions to you regarding the investigations you were able to conduct. With your leave, Mr. President, may I request that the first document be shown to the witness. It is E3/229, and it is the transcript of the meeting of the Standing Committee on the night of the 22nd of February, 1976. So this document, in principle, is referred to in the footnotes. With the assistance of the court officer, may I request that Mr. Heder be shown this document, and then I will put questions to him subsequently.
The President, you may proceed.
La page
The page that is of interest to me is the first page. In principle, in all the languages, in French, it is 0033495. In Khmer, it is 0000713. In English, it is 00182625. Before putting questions to you specifically on the contents, may I request you to confirm whether you were familiar with this document and that this is part of what you refer to in the footnotes you refer to, that is footnote 33 and E31/169.
Yes, this is one of those documents, and I'll note that the English annotations in this instance are David Chandler's, not mine.
en français, je n'ai de toute façon.
I have no annotations in the French copy, so I won't be able to put any questions on the annotations. I am interested in the agenda, national defense matters, particularly Big I report on the national defense situation, small 1, the situation on the eastern border. And I will read out the first paragraph. Comrade Kieu reported that since early February, Vietnam has acted strongly along our eastern border, especially in Ratanakiri, Svay Rieng, and Kam Samna. They have entered and deployed 200 meters to 3 kilometers from the border inside our territory. At some locations, they have deployed inside Old Lon Nol military camps in platoon to company strength. When we gave chase, they withdrew with men who numbered a section and even a company. They said that their central committee had sent them. End of quote. My question is as follows. Perhaps I should give you enough time to finish reading the article.
C'est bon. Donc, ma question est de
So my question is, if during your research, whether for your work as a researcher or whether as an investigator for the OCIJ or for the OCP, did you obtain other documentary elements or interviews of people who were in that area, that is to say the eastern border, who spoke to you about these incursions of Vietnamese troops, or in any case of these border problems? Were you made aware of this during your research activity?
Yes, to some extent.
Est-ce que
Can you tell us whether this was in the context of other documents or whether this was in the context of interviews? And do you remember when you conducted these interviews and where, if you remember?
In terms of documents, although I can't be specific about the exact time frame, there are certainly either telegrams or reports from the eastern side of Cambodia describing what the telegrams or reports say are Vietnamese incursions into what is claimed to be Cambodian territory. With regard to interviews, to my recollection, at least in my day at OCP and my day at OCIJ, I don't recall anything specific about this. However, in the interviews I did in the period between 78 and 84, and in the interviews in which I was involved in doing in 2005, there are oral accounts of these kinds of events. And again, whether we're talking specifically about February 1976 and these particular locations, that's a finer distinction I'm not sure I can make. But in broader terms, yes.
And reacting to this issue of date, you told us that this did not necessarily happen on the 22nd of February 1976. So do you remember if these border issues happened at other moments in the period of democratic Kampuchea? Did this happen within one single year, or were there such incidents at other moments?
Toujours, excusez-moi, toujours à la lumière.
Of course, always in light of what you heard and of the evidence that you gathered. I would like to repeat this to you just so that things are clear.
Well, setting aside the difficulty of disentangling the question of presence of Vietnamese military forces inside Cambodia in a context where it's not described as in territorial encroachment on the one hand, and instances in which it's described as in territorial encroachment on the other, because sometimes people made that distinction. There are accounts right from before 1975, before April 1975, through 75, 76, and 77. And of course, in the latter part of 77 and continuously thereafter, there is fighting back and forth across what I think both sides would recognize as some place that's the border. So in interviews and in official documents, internal documents, particularly post-75 for the internal documents, I don't recall any internal documents from before 75, but yeah, this is happening on an increasingly large scale, right from pre-April 1975 through to 7 January 79.
Mr. President, I wish to turn to another line of questioning, so maybe we could take a break now, or do you wish me to continue?
President, thank you. The time is appropriate for a short break. We will take a break now and return at 3 p.m. And court officer, please assist the witness during the break and have him return to the courtroom at 3 p.m. The court is now in recess.